My sister's place, she whispered. You lied to me before you ever set foot on my land, Wyatt Callahan said, his voice low as thunder. You came wearing another woman's promise. Clara Whitmore didn't flinch. I came wearing the truth, and I'm the first person who's ever handed it to you straight. He stared at her like she'd struck him. Protected my sister, you got me instead. I won't beg you to keep me, but I won't lie to keep you comfortable either. And somewhere behind his cold eyes, it had been cracked. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Follow Clara and Wyatt all the way to the end. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far my stories travel. Again, hadn't even stopped rolling before Clara Whitmore made up her mind that she would not cry. Calling her, she had promised herself that much back in Missouri, on the platform where her father couldn't look her in the eye. She had promised it again on the long rail west and again on the last rough miles by coach. And she said it to herself one final time now as the ranch house rose up in front of her, big, silent as a courthouse. Whoa, the driver muttered to the horses. The world went still. A man was already standing on the porch. He did not come down the steps. He did not raise a hand. He simply stood there with his arms folded, watching her the way a man watches weather rolling in off the plains, trying to judge how bad it was going to be. Clara climbed down without waiting to be helped. Mr. Callahan, she said. That's right, I'm Clara Whitmore. She watched his face when she said it. She had rehearsed 100 versions of this moment, and in every single one, she had told the lie first and the truth later. Ease him into it, let him settle. That was the coward's plan. She had carried it all the way from Missouri like a stone in her shoe. So, standing in front of him, she couldn't do it. About Adeline, Wyatt Callahan said. It wasn't a question. And that single sentence, the way he said her sister's name, careful, like it was something he'd been holding on to, told Clara everything she needed to know about letters passed between this man and her family. Oh, she said, I'm not. The driver, sensing trouble the way men do, already unloading her single trunk and setting it in the dust like he wanted no part of what came next. Clara Whitmore, Wyatt said slowly, the woman I've been writing to for 6 months, the woman I sent train fare for, that's who I've been expecting to step down off that wagon. I know. Then who in God's name are you? Clara lifted her chin. Told you. Clara Whitmore, Adeline's younger sister. For a long moment, he said nothing at all. Her muscle worked in his jaw, and then he came down the steps slow, deliberate, one boot at a time, until he was standing close enough that she had to look up at him. Start talking, he said, and I'd advise you to make it the truth. I've got a real short patience for the other thing. So she gave it to him, all of it. Standing in the dust with her hands folded in front of her, like a schoolgirl reciting her lessons, Clara Whitmore told a stranger the thing that had been eating her alive for 3 weeks. My sister was promised to you, she said. That part's real. Every letter she sent, she meant. But 2 weeks before she was set to travel, Ellen came calling in town. A banker's son, prospects, money already in hand, not money out here that she'd have to trust a stranger for. Clara's voice didn't shake. That she chose him. She stayed, and your family said nothing. My family, Clara said, was drowning in debt. Mr. Callahan, the fare you sent, they'd already spent half of it before Adeline changed her mind. There was no way to send it back, and there was no way to send you a letter saying the bride you paid for wasn't coming. Because a letter like that gets a man out here talking to a lawyer. So they sent you. So they sent me. He let out a breath through his nose. A sack of flour to settle an account. The words landed hard because they were exactly right, and Clara felt her face go hot. What if she held his eyes? I could have gotten off that train in Cheyenne, she said. I could have found work and never come the last 100 miles. They would have stopped me. I came the whole way because I wasn't going to let you stand out here waiting for a woman who was never going to arrive. You deserve to hear it from a person, not a lawyer, a rumor. You deserve to hear it to your face. Wyatt's arms came uncrossed. That was the first crack. She saw it. Whatever he'd been braced for, a scheming woman, a beggar, a liar, spinning a story to soften him up, she had given him none of it. And he didn't know what to do with the silence she left behind. Money, he said finally. Testing. No. You want the marriage. They ran off. Family still needs the arrangement. So you'll take her place and call it done. No. Then what do you want? Her? Miss Whitmore? Because I'm looking at a woman who traveled 2,000 miles to a man who owes her nothing. I'd like to know the angle. Clara felt something rise up in her, then not anger exactly. It's close cousin, the tiredness that comes after. You've been carrying other people's shame for too long. "I'll work," she said. Wyatt blinked. "Come again. You paid a fare. I'll earn it back. I can keep books. I can manage records. I can run a household ledger better than any man you've got out here. You wager money you've got trouble in your accounts that nobody's caught." She saw his eyes narrow at that, and she filed it away. "I'll work off what my family owes you, honest wage against honest debt, and when it's paid, I'll leave, and you'll never hear the name Whitmore again. That's the angle, Mr. Callahan. I don't want your ring. I'm gonna walk away not owing you a thing." The wind moved across the yard. There behind the house, a windmill creaked, and Wyatt Callahan looked at her like she was the first honest thing he'd seen in a very long time. "Not what I expected," he said. "No," Clara said. "Imagine I am." He put her in the small room off the kitchen, the one that had been the last cook left, and he did it without a word of welcome and without a word of cruelty either. Clara decided she could live with. That first night she lay awake a long while. Else, she was not a fool. She knew what she looked like to the men on this ranch, a young woman, city-soft, blonde, alone, showing up on the master's doorstep under a cloud of scandal. She knew the story they'd already built in their heads before they ever heard her speak. She had spent her whole life being underestimated by men who mistook kindness for weakness and youth for foolishness, and something told her this place would be no different. She was right. "So you're the mail order gal," said the ranch foreman the next morning, a shouldered man named Hollis Dunn, who had a way of smiling that never got anywhere near his eyes. "I hear you ain't even the right one." Bait and switch. "Clara Whitmore," she said, and put out her hand. He looked at it like she'd offered him a dead fish. "Done," he said, and didn't take it. She let her hand drop, almost anything. "You run the outfit for Mr. Callahan, 15 years. Then you're the man I'll be needing to talk to about the ledgers." Something flickered across his face. Just a flicker there and gone. But Clara Whitmore had spent 5 years reading her father's face across a supper table while creditors circled Colorado, and she knew the look of a man who's just been told the thing he least wanted to hear. "Callahan handles his own books," Dunn said. "Mr. Callahan," Clara said pleasantly, "handed them to me this morning." That part was almost true. She had asked, and Wyatt had grunted, and a grunt from a man like that was as good as a signature. But she watched what her words did to Hollis Dunn's face. What they did was worth the small stretch of the truth. Did he? He did. The foreman's jaw tightened. "Then I hope you can count, little lady. Yeah, because it's a big operation, and there's a lot of numbers. Here, numbers ain't always as tidy as they are back in the city." "I've noticed," Clara said, "they're usually untidy for a reason." And she smiled at him, sweet, harmless as a Sunday morning, and walked away, left Hollis Dunn standing in the yard, staring after her with the beginnings of a very ugly thought forming behind his eyes. Her ledgers were a mess. Clara knew it within an hour. Not the ordinary mess of a busy man doing his own accounts. She knew that mess. She'd cleaned it up a dozen times for her father. This was a different animal. It is the mess a person makes on purpose when they want the truth buried deep enough that a casual glance slides right over it. There's feed deliveries logged that didn't match the feed in the barn. Their payments to suppliers, who when she checked the correspondence, seemed to keep changing addresses. Cattle sold at prices a little too low. Again and again, always to the same 2 or 3 buyers. But it was bleeding this ranch. Slow, careful. A little at a time, you'd drain a strong animal, so it never quite knew it was dying. She was still bent over the books when Wyatt came in that evening. "At it all day," he said. "Not quite a question." "I have." Anne Clara set down her pen. She thought about lying about saying it's fine, or just needs time, because the truth was going to make her enemies in this house on her second day, and a smart woman knew how to wait, but she wasn't going to be that woman. She'd decided that in the dust the day before. Somebody's stealing from you, she said. Numbers. And they've been doing it for a long time, and they're good at it. No money. Wyatt went very still. That's a serious thing to say, he said quietly. It's a serious thing to find. You've been here one day. I've been keeping desperate men's books since I was 19 years old. Mr. Callahan, I know what it looks like when a house is quietly falling down from the inside. This house is falling down. She turned the ledger toward him. Feed right here. You're paying for near twice what your barn is holding. Where's the rest of it going? He didn't look at the book. He looked at her. Who told you to look at the feed? Nobody. Nobody wanted me looking at anything. She held his gaze. Who runs your outfit didn't want to give me these ledgers this morning. I did a good deal. More than a foreman ought to want anything to do with paperwork. For the first time, a crack of something in Wyatt Callahan that wasn't suspicion of her. It was fear, not for himself. She'd learned that about him later, that Wyatt Callahan was not a man who scared easy for his own sake. This ranch was the only thing he had ever built that was truly his, that it might be rotting from the inside. While he stood guard at the front door, that put a look in his eyes she would not forget. "It's done," he said slowly. "Has worked for me 15 years. I'm not saying it's him," Clara said. "And I'm saying the somebody, whoever he is, didn't want me near these numbers. Now, a man's got two reasons to keep a woman away from the books. He thinks she's too stupid to read them." She closed the ledger. He's afraid she isn't. Wyatt Callahan looked at Clara Whitmore for a long moment. "Keep looking," he said, and walked out. She kept looking. The next morning she came down to find her ledgers moved. Not taken, moved. Left open to a different page than she'd left them. Three of her loose papers slid back into the wrong order. The feed page, the one she'd shown Wyatt, gone entirely. Clara stood in the little room off the kitchen and felt her heart pounding. She understood that she had made a mistake. She had told Wyatt the truth in the open, where the walls of an old house carry every word, and somebody had heard her. "Morning," said Hollis Dunn from the kitchen doorway. She turned. He was leaning against the frame with a cup of coffee. "As easy as you please, Mr. Dunn. Sleep all right?" "All rooms the sound carries something terrible. Man can lie in his bunk clear across the yard and near about hear the missus of the house talking after supper." He sipped his coffee. There were a missus. There it was. He was telling her he'd heard, telling her plain and daring her to do something about it. Clara's every instinct screamed at her to back down. She was one woman, the days in, no allies, just standing. No husband, no ring of scandal in a borrowed dress. Her move was to smile and mumble and make herself small until she understood the ground she was standing on. She did not make the smart move. "Mr. Dunn," she said, and her voice was perfectly steady. "Somebody came into this room last night and went through my papers and took one of them. A page about the feed accounts." His face didn't change. "Oh, that's so. Well," he set his coffee down on the counter. "Oh, you want to be careful throwing around a word like took. Out here a woman accuses a man of thieving. She'd best be real sure of her footing. It's not so forgiving as it is back east. I'm on my footing just fine, are you?" He smiled, and this time it did reach his eyes, and what was in them made her cold. "You're a long way from home, Miss Whitmore. Long way from your daddy and your sister and whoever else it is you think's got your back. Out here it's just you. And a house full of men who've been loyal to this ranch a whole lot longer than you've been alive." "Loyal," Clara repeated. "Oh, then you'll want to know somebody's robbing it blind." The smile fell off his face like a dropped plate, her heart hammering, hands cold, everything in her body telling her to run, took one step toward him instead of away. "You can go through my papers every night for a month," she said, low and level. "You can burn every page I write. It won't matter. I've got it up here." Now she tapped her temple, "and there's no thief alive who can steal a number out of my head. So you go on and tell whoever you're telling. Tell them the sister they sent to keep quiet isn't going to keep quiet. Them Clara Whitmore can add." For one terrible second she thought he might strike her. A voice came from behind him. "Done." Wyatt Callahan filled the kitchen doorway. Nobody had heard him come in. He had a way of doing that. I would learn, moving through his own house, silent as a held breath. And by the look on his face, he had been standing there long enough. Hollis Dunn said, and his whole manner changed, smoothed over like water closing over a stone. Just having words with the young lady here about, I heard the words. Wyatt's voice was flat. Clerk, Dunn went. But he looked back once, and the look he gave her was not a threat anymore. A threat is what a man gives you when he thinks he still has time. This was something colder. This was the look of a man deciding. Peppers, you shouldn't have done that, Wyatt said. Dunn was gone. Somebody went through my papers. I heard all of it. He crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he looked at her not like a problem or a liar or a mistake, but like a person he was suddenly, seriously worried about. You just told a man who might be a thief, right to his teeth, that you can prove it. In a house where he sleeps and you sleep, and I'm one man who can't be everywhere at once. I know. Do you? There was something almost angry in it. It took her a moment to understand that the anger wasn't at her. There are men out here, Miss Whitmore, who'll do a great deal worse than shuffle your papers. In the drawing room, if somebody decided you were a danger to a scheme worth real money, then I'm already in danger, Clara said. And pretending I can't count wouldn't fix that. It'd just mean I'd die quiet. Wyatt stopped. No way to put it, he said. You're a cold man. I figured you'd appreciate plain speaking, and she would remember this for the rest of her life. Wyatt Callahan almost smiled. It didn't quite get there. It never quite got there, those early days. But the corner of his mouth moved, something in his eyes eased, just a fraction. And Clara understood that she had just seen behind the wall for 1/2 of 1 second. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, he said, the most reckless. My father used to say they're the same thing, Clara said, seen from different sides. Wyatt looked at her a moment longer. A man riding to the county seat tomorrow, he said. I'll have him bring back everything the recorder's office has on my land, every contract, every lien, every note against this place going back 5 years. Find me what's rotten, Miss Whitmore. You find it before whoever's behind it finishes the job. His jaw set. And you don't go anywhere on this ranch alone. Not the barn, the yard after dark, not one step. You hear me? I hear you. Say it back. I won't go anywhere alone, Clara said. At once, satisfied, and turned to go. But at the door he stopped. He said, without turning around. Why what? Why do it at all? Give yourself, pay off the fare, and walk away. Never hear the name Whitmore again. You could go through those books slow. That's nothing. Collect your wage, keep your head down, leave in a month, and let this ranch rot behind you. Your ranch. It's not your fight. Now he did turn. It's not even your marriage. So why in God's name are you standing in my kitchen, making an enemy out of a man twice your size over my feed accounts? And Clara, who had 100 careful answers, spent her whole life giving people the careful answer, gave him the true one instead. I'm sick to death, she said, of being sent places to keep quiet. Whole life, somebody's been deciding what I'm worth and where I belong and how much of the truth I'm allowed to say out loud. They're decided. My sister decided, and now I've traveled 2,000 miles and there's a man in your barn who took one look at me and decided I'm too young and too soft and too much of a woman to matter. Her voice caught just once, and she pushed through it. Well, I'm done being decided about, Mr. Callahan. This is the first thing in my whole life that's mine to do. That has sent me to fix your books. Nobody's making me. I'm choosing it. And I would rather stand in a room full of men who think I'm nothing and prove them wrong than spend one more day being what somebody else needs me to be. The kitchen was very quiet. Wyatt Callahan stood in the doorway of his own house and looked at the woman who'd arrived as a substitute. There's a scandal, a mistake, and Clara watched something move across his face that she couldn't name. It'd be a long time before either of them called it what it was. Right, he said, rough. All right then. And he left her there. Clara Whitmore stood alone in the kitchen, with her heart still pounding from Dunn. Her danger, from the strange new feeling of having said out loud the truest thing she'd ever said to another living soul. That night, she barred her door. She hadn't been given anything to bar it with, so she used the room. She dragged the little cook's dresser across the floorboards, inch by careful inch, so the scraping wouldn't carry it hard against the door. Then she sat on the edge of the narrow bed with the lamp turned low, and the county records she'd already started copying spread across her knees. And she did not sleep. Around midnight, she heard the floorboard. One board, out in the kitchen, the particular groan of the loose one by the stove. She'd learned it already. The way you learn the sounds of a strange house when your life might depend on them. Clara turned the lamp down to nothing. She sat in the dark, and she listened, and she heard the board settle back, and then nothing. A long, long nothing. Somebody standing in her kitchen in the black of night, moving, listening the way she was listening. Her hand found the letter opener on the dresser without her telling it to. Turn. Slow. So slow. A hand testing whether it would give and finding the dresser, finding the weight, finding that the soft city woman in the borrowed dress had barred her door like she'd expected exactly this. Turned back. The floorboard groaned again, retreating this time, and then the back door of the kitchen opened and shut as a whisper, and whoever it was gone into the Montana night. Clara Whitmore sat in the dark for the rest of that night with a letter opener in her fist and her back against the wall, and she did not cry. She'd promised herself she wouldn't on the platform in Missouri, but she did make herself one new promise. In the black, listening to her own heart slam against her ribs. Whoever wanted her gone was going to learn something about the woman they'd underestimated. She wasn't going anywhere. She'd been sent her whole life. This was the first place she had ever chosen to stay. Morning. She was going to open those books, and she was going to find every last dollar they'd stolen. And she was going to lay it out so plain that not even a house full of loyal men could look away from it. A quiet substitute, a convenient girl, a name to fill a hole and ask no questions. They had no idea what they'd sent for. Outside, the wind came down off the mountains and moved across the wide, dark yard. And somewhere out in the bunkhouse, a man lay awake, wondering what to do about a woman who could count. Off the kitchen, that woman waited for the sun, eye-eyed and steady, already planning her next move. I'm here as her sister's replacement. She was going to leave if she left at all, as something nobody in Montana territory would ever forget. Morning came gray and cold, and Clara Whitmore was already at the kitchen table with the county records spread in front of her when Wyatt Callahan came down. In the doorway, he looked at the dresser, still shoved half across the floor where she dragged it back from the door. He looked at the letter opener sitting beside her hand, at her face, the shadows under her eyes, the two straight set of her shoulders. Somebody came to my door last night, she said, or he could ask, around midnight. Turned the knob, it barred and left through the kitchen. Wyatt went still in that way he had. It made a room feel smaller. You saw who? No. One man, quiet, knew which floorboard groaned and stepped careful around it. She turned a page. A man who knows this house. Not a drifter, not a stranger passing through. You should have woken me. And done what? She looked up at him. Chased a shadow across a dark yard? All that would have told him is that I'm scared. There he wondered. Wyatt crossed the kitchen and set both hands flat on the table and leaned down until they were near eye to eye. Clever. You listen to me. This stops being a thing about numbers the second a man's standing at your door in the dark. Understand me? Numbers I can let you chase. A man in the night is a different animal. Then help me chase him faster, Clara said. Because the sooner I lay it all out plain, the sooner he's got no reason to come to my door at all. For a moment, neither of them moved. Clara saw the war going on behind his eyes, the part of him that wanted to lock her in a room where nothing could reach her, and the part of him that was starting, against his own better judgment, to trust her. What do you need? He said finally. Time. And for you to not tell a single soul what I find until I say it's ready. She held his gaze. As whoever it is, Mr. Callahan, he's close. Close enough to hear us talk. Close enough to walk to my door and back to his bed in the time it takes to boil coffee. If we tip our hand before I've got it airtight, He'll burn every record he can reach and swear on a Bible he never touched a thing. Wyatt straightened slowly. A lawyer's mind, he said. I've got a debtor's daughter's mind, Clara said. It's the same thing, only hungrier. That almost got the smile again. Almost. The records the writer had brought back from the county seat were worse than the ledgers. Because the ledgers were just the ranch talking to itself, and a man could lie in his own books all day long. Records were the ranch talking to the outside world. And there the lies had to line up with somebody else's lies. And where two liars try to match their stories, that's where the seams show. Clara found the first seam by noon. Come look at this, she said. It passed through. She had 3 papers laid side by side. Your feed. You buy it through a supplier called Territory Provisioning. Here's the payments out of your account regular. Steady more money than your barn's worth of feed should cost? We knew that already. But look, she tapped the county record. Terry Provisioning doesn't own a warehouse, doesn't own a wagon, doesn't own so much as a sack. It's a name on a paper that was registered 18 months ago at the county seat. A lawyer. For a client whose name isn't listed, Wyatt frowned. Who's it front for? That's the question, isn't it? Clara sat back. Somebody set up a company that sells you feed it doesn't have, prices too high, and takes your money every month. And somebody on this ranch signs off that the feed-arrived feed that doesn't exist. There too, Mr. Callahan. One outside to send the paper, inside to swear the wagons came. Dunn signs the deliveries. Wyatt's hands closed slowly into fists. 15 years, he said quietly. He carried me through a winter that killed half the herds in the valley. He pulled me out from under a downed horse with his own 2 hands. 15 years, and I'm telling you what the paper says, Clara said gently. Oh, the paper doesn't know. He pulled you out from under a horse. Paper only knows whose name is on the line. Wyatt turned away from the table and stood there a long moment with his back to her. Clara let him have it. She knew this feeling. She'd felt it herself. The day she understood was going to send her west, like freight. Particular sickness of learning that someone you'd trusted your whole life had a price, and you just found out what it was. Prove it, he said, turning around. Don't guess it. Don't figure it. It's so tight, a judge couldn't wiggle loose. Can you do that? Give me the supply invoices from the barn, Clara said. There's the physical papers Dunn signs when the wagons come. Those signatures match a delivery day when your own hands can swear no wagon ever rolled in. That's not a guess anymore. The rope. Wyatt turned around. They're in the tack room, he said. Locked box. Dunn keeps the key. And there it was, around the very thing she needed. Then I need that box, Clara said, and I need it without Dunn knowing it's gone. The chance came 2 days later, and it came because Wyatt made it come. He announced at supper loud. Easy. The most words Clara had ever heard him string together for an audience, that he was riding the North Line the next morning to check the fence before the herds moved up, and he wanted Dunn with him. Just the 2 of them. Today's ride, back by dark, Clara understood exactly what he was doing. He was taking the wolf out of the henhouse. She caught his eye across the table. Didn't so much as blink. But under the table as he rose, his hand brushed the back of her chair, and there was a small iron thing pressed there where only she would find it. There's a key. She waited until the dust of their 2 horses had faded off the north road. She waited another full hour past that, sitting at the kitchen table with her heart going hard, letting herself count to 1,000 twice over, because a smart thief always doubles back to see who moves the second he's gone. He doubled back. The tack room was dim and close and smelled of leather and oil. The box was right where Wyatt had said, on a high shelf behind the bridles. Clara's hands were shaking as she fit the key. She hated that they were shaking. She told them to stop, and they didn't listen. The lid came up. Inside the delivery invoices, months of them, one signed in the same square, heavy hand H. On everyone stamped received, everyone marking wagon loads of feed rolling onto the ranch on days and dates. She could now check against the whole outfit's memory. She didn't take the box. That was the thing about Clara Whitmore that the men out here kept failing to understand. She didn't need to take anything. She sat right there on an overturned bucket in the dim tack room, and she copied. Fast, exact, her pen flying the way she'd copied her father's ruinous accounts 100 times by candlelight. Dates, amounts, signatures noted, everyone. She was on the last page when she heard the horse. Coming in at a canter. Wrong they'd left too, but they should come back too, and not till dark. And it wasn't near dark. Clara's blood went to ice water. She got the box shut, put it back on the shelf, square in its dust ring so it looked untouched. The lid latched and the key in her fist, and she was 3 steps out of the tack room. Papers shoved down the front of her dress. When Hollis Dunn rode into the yard alone, he saw her. For one long second across the yard, they looked at each other, the foreman on his lathered horse, the woman standing outside the tack room she had no reason on earth to be near. More, Dunn said, and swung down. You're a ways from the house. I was looking for you. It happens, Clara said. At least came out steadier than she felt. I thought you rode north with Mr. Callahan. Horse threw a shoe. His eyes hadn't left her. They flicked once to the tack room door behind her. Back. Rode in to fetch another mount. What'd you need me for? Her mind ran like a rabbit and landed out on solid ground. The kitchen accounts. Mr. Callahan wants a proper household budget kept separate from the ranch. I can't set one without knowing what the outfit spends to feed the hands. I figured you'd know it cold. She tilted her head, all sweetness, but it can keep till supper if your horse needs seeing to. Dunn looked at her a long moment. Believe her, she could see that plain, but she'd given him a story that fit. A man could pretend to believe if he wanted to keep pretending. And that was all a lie ever needed to do. It didn't have to be swallowed whole. I just had to give both parties an excuse to smile and step apart. Supper then, Dunn said. Supper, Clara agreed. She made herself walk to the house at an ordinary pace, not one step faster. The stolen dates pressed against her ribs and her heart going like a hammer. And she did not look back, because a woman who looks back is a woman with something behind her. Clara Whitmore had decided a long time ago that she would give these men nothing to read. Behind her, she heard it, the tack room door, opening. Checking his box, she got inside, she got the door shut, and she stood with her back against it and let herself shake, just for a moment, just this once, because she'd nearly walked straight into him. And if he'd come 30 seconds sooner, she'd have been standing there with the box open in her lap, and no story in the world could have covered that. There hadn't. And she had it now. She had every date. When Wyatt rode in at dusk and found her at the kitchen table, she slid the copied pages across to him without a word and watched his face change as he read the thing that turned a suspicion into a hanging offense. And for a delivery on the 4th of last month, Clara said quietly. 30 sacks of feed. Ask any man who was here that day. Ask him if a single wagon came up that road. Wyatt's face was terrible to look at. Wagon came, he said. I was here. I'd have seen it. He looked up at her. He stood in my barn and signed his name to a lie. I took my money for it and looked me in the eye at supper the same night. Yes, Clara. It was the first time he'd used her given name. Not to notice he'd done it. How much? All told. Much has he bled out of this place? She'd been dreading the question, because she'd already done the sum, and she knew what it was going to do to him. Near $4,000, she said, over 18 months. And that's only territory provisioning. That's only the feed. Wholesales, too. Mr. Callahan sold low to the same buyers over and over. I haven't even finished running those down yet. When I do, I think the number's going to be worse. Maybe a great deal worse. Wyatt set the papers down very carefully, like they might break, and then he said, the thing that changed everything. A foreman scheme, he said slowly. Clara looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, $4,000, a fake company registered by a lawyer, and buyers lined up to take my cattle cheap. Clara, this Dunn can't read past a supply list. He signs his name in block letters because that's all he can write. Like that doesn't set up a company at the county seat through a lawyer that line up cattle buyers in 3 counties. He tapped the paper. He's paying him. He's the inside hand. But the mind behind this is somewhere else. with money already, and lawyers already, and a reason to want me broke. The kitchen went quiet. Into that quiet came the cold understanding, settling over both of them at once. Somebody who wants your land, Clara said. Somebody who wants my land. She thought of the county records, ones she hadn't fully worked through yet, the notes and liens against the place that she'd set aside to chase the feed. A cold feeling walked up her spine because there had been a name on some of those papers, and a name that had meant nothing to her 2 days ago. And she suddenly badly wanted to go read it again. Callahan, she said. The land notes, the liens against the ranch. Hold your paper. If you had a bad year, the winter you mentioned, that killed the herds, did you borrow to get through it? Something shifted in his face. But a different kind. The kind a proud man wears over an old wound. I did, he said. Everybody in the valley did or died. There was a man came through buying up the paper the banks wouldn't carry. Gave good terms when nobody else would. Half the ranches in the territory owe him a piece. His name. Wyatt looked at her. Durham Holloway, he said, and Clara Whitmore's stomach dropped clean through the floor. Because she knew that name. She had heard that name across her own family's supper table. In Missouri, in the worst months, when the creditors were circling and her father was drinking and her mother wept in the next room. Landman, an investor out west, man her father had done business with, had owed a man whose money had understood now with a horror that made the room tilt, mixed up somehow in the very debt that sent her west in the first place. Wyatt's voice, sharp, close. What is it? On white as a sheet. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tell him, said one voice inside her. Right now, Graham Holloway is a name from my own house. My own father dealt with him, and the debt that put me on that train might be tangled up with the same man who's trying to take your land. Another voice, older, the voice of every year she'd spent protecting her family's shame, said, you don't know that yet. You don't know how deep it runs. You say his name in this kitchen and connect it to your father. This man who's only just started to trust you is going to look at you and see the whole thing all over again. The substitute, the schemer, the girl sent by a family that's been dealing with his enemy the entire time. They'll think you're part of it. He'll think that's why you really came. Wyatt had come around the table. He was standing over her now, and his voice had lost its edge. There was something almost gentle in it. That was worse. That was so much worse. You know that name. She could lie. She was good at the plain truth, but she'd learned young how to lie when someone she loved needed protecting, and some cornered animal part of her reached for it now. And then she thought of the dust, the first day, and the promise she'd made herself standing in front of him, that she would be the one person who handed this man the truth straight, even when it cost her, especially when it cost her. As Clara said, I know that name. How? Because my father owed him money. Her voice was very quiet. It didn't shake, and she would be proud of that later. Graham Holloway. He's an investor. He buys distressed paper. He did business back east too. I don't know all of it. They never told me all of it. But I heard that name in my own house, Callahan, in the months before I was sent here, when the debt was at its worst. She made herself look up at him. The debt that put me on the train to you. I don't know. I think it may be his. Wyatt Callahan stood over her, absolutely still, and Clara watched the trust she had spent a week building start to crack right down the middle of his face. Let me understand you, he said, and his voice had gone flat and cold as the day she'd arrived. The man robbing me blind, the man behind the fake company, and the whole scheme to break me and take my land. Man is a man your family owes money to. Your family, who sent you here to me. Yes. And you knew his name the whole time you were sitting at my table telling me you had no angle. I didn't know it was him, Clara said. Well, finally, her voice did break just once, because this was the thing she'd feared from the very first day, and it was coming true in front of her. I swear to you, Wyatt, I did not know. Holloway is a name I heard in a dark house 1,000 miles from here in the worst year of my life. I never connected it to this ranch. I never connected it to you. I only heard you say it just now, and I felt the floor go out from under me, Because I understood what you're understanding right now, and I told you anyway. The second I knew. Doesn't that count for something? A schemer keeps that quiet. A schemer lets you never find out. I'd have said nothing, and you'd have been none the wiser. I told you, because I'd rather you look at me the way you're looking at me right now than lie to you for one more minute. The kitchen was so quiet she could hear the fire. Wyatt Callahan looked at her for a long, long time. Clara understood that everything hung on this moment. Everything. Whether she was, in his eyes, the one honest person in a house full of liars or just the last liar, the one who'd worked her way to his table and his trust so she could be there when the trap closed. She didn't beg. She'd promised herself the first day she'd never beg him for anything. She just sat there with the truth laid bare between them and let him decide. What did you find out about Dunn? Wyatt said slowly. Like day. The question threw her. 3 days ago. I saw the delivery signatures didn't. And when did you tell me? That same night. Norm hour, near enough. I brought you the pages the minute and Holloway. When did you find out he was behind it? Understanding dawned. Just now. This minute. You said his name and you told me, Wyatt said. This minute. This same minute. Clara stopped. A woman working an angle, Wyatt said. And something in his voice had changed, thawed. Though his eyes were still hard, buries the thing that hurts her. She sits on it. She waits to see if she'll get caught before she ever gives it up. Then hands you the rope to hang her, with the second it's in her hand. He let out a long breath. Every single time you've learned something that made you look bad, you've told me inside the hour. A liar can fake a lot of things. He can fake that. Not for a week straight. Not with a face as easy to read as yours. Clara let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 1,000 miles. Believe me, she said. I believe you. Wyatt pulled out the chair beside her and sat close. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a man interrogating a stranger. Like two people on the same side of a table for the first time. Understand what this means. If your father's debt is Holloway's paper, Holloway didn't just happen to be robbing me while you happened to arrive. He's been squeezing your family in Missouri and squeezing my ranch in Montana at the same time. Not coincidence. That's a man with a reach. You think he knew, Clara said slowly. I think he knew I was coming here. The thought had occurred to her the same instant she said it, and it was so ugly she almost wished she hadn't. Wyatt's jaw tightened. One who holds your father's debt. A man who wants my ranch. There sends his daughter, west, to my door, or to a marriage that ties our two families together. He met her eyes. Or Holloway, and I wanted this ranch. I couldn't dream up a better piece on the board than a Whitmore living right here, inside my house. Built to a family that owes me everything. Perfectly placed to see everything I do. Clara felt sick. I think my father sent me here for him, as a spy, as his piece. I think, Wyatt said carefully, that your father may have been told to send you here, of the excuse, and never once stopped to wonder why the man he owed money to cared so much where his daughter got married. He watched her face. I don't think you knew. I've watched you a week, Clara. I don't believe you knew. But I think you were sent as a piece in a game. Same as you felt your whole life, only this time the man moving you wasn't your father. It was the man your father was too scared to say no to. And there it was. The whole thing laid bare on the kitchen table between them. Clara Whitmore had traveled 2,000 miles to escape being a piece someone else moved. And she'd walked straight into the middle of a board where she was the most valuable piece of all. She stood up. Then we've got to move faster than he does, she said. Holloway thinks he's got a Whitmore in your house, feeding him what he needs, then he doesn't know the Whitmore he's got. He thinks he's got my father's daughter. Her chin came up, and there was steel in it now, cold and bright. He doesn't. Father sold me for a debt. I don't owe that man anything. I am going to take everything I know about how he ruins people, everything I learned in that dark house he made, and I am going to use it to break him instead. Wyatt was looking at her like he'd never quite seen her before. You'd go against your own family, he said. Your father. Everything you came from. My family, Clara said, put me on a train like a debt payment and never once asked if I'd survive the trip. You're the first person in my whole life who's told me not to walk anywhere alone in the dark because he was worried I'd get hurt. Her voice caught. Let it. So no, Mr. Callahan, I won't protect the people who sold me. I'll protect the man who was worried about me. That's my choice. Fine. The first one that was ever fully mine. For a moment, Wyatt didn't say anything at all. Then he stood, and he took her hand the first time he touched her. It was rough and warm, and it swallowed hers whole, and he held it like a courtship, and not like a bargain, but like a man sealing a pact with the only other person he trusted in the world. All right, he said. Then we do it together. His grip tightened, and Holloway figures out his piece has turned against him, being useful to him. And a man like that doesn't leave a piece on the board once it's turned. Understand me? The night somebody stood at your door, that was before he even knew whose side you're on. It gets worse from here, much worse. I know, Clara said. Get back. It gets worse from here, she said steadily. I know, I'm staying anyway. And it meant it down to her bones right up until 3 days later. The letter came. It came in the ordinary mail sack, and it was addressed to her in her father's cramped your hand, and Clara took it up to her room and barred the door before she opened it. And she read it, standing by the window in the last of the light. Dear Clara, it began. You must trust me now as you never have before. A letter of business will be arriving in the territory within the fortnight to conclude certain arrangements. While at the Callahan Ranch, you are to receive him warmly and tell him everything you have learned of Mr. Callahan's affairs, his debts, accounts, his weaknesses, whatever you have seen. Do this and our family's obligations will be forgiven entire. Refuse and we are ruined, and it will be your doing. Oh, you will not fail us. You have always been the good daughter who does what she is told. Your loving father. I read it 3 times. Then she stood very still, reading the paper that proved everything. Wyatt had guessed that she had been sent as a piece. Holloway was coming, that her own father was ordering her to betray the one man who'd ever worried whether she lived or died. And downstairs, she heard the front door open, and Wyatt's boots on the floor, and his voice calling her name, easy and unguarded in a way it had never once been the week before, a man calling out to someone he'd started, against all sense, to trust. Clara looked at the letter in her hand. She looked at the door, and she understood that she was holding in her 2 hands the power to save her family or save the man downstairs, and that whichever she chose, she was about to become at last and forever a woman who could never again be told what she was worth. She folded the letter, and she went down the stairs to tell Wyatt Callahan the truth. He was standing by the fire when she came down, hat still in his hand, and he turned at the sound of her on the stairs with something loose and unguarded in his face. And then he saw the letter, her face above it, and the looseness went out of him all at once. Read it, she said, and held it out. What is it? It's the thing you warned me about. Today, her hand didn't shake. She'd made sure of that on the stairs. Read it, Wyatt, and then look at me and decide what you think I am. Because I've decided what I am, and I'd like to know if we're deciding the same. He took the letter, at once fast and then again slow, and Clara watched his knuckles go white around the paper. So he looked up. His eyes were terrible. He wants you to spy, Wyatt said. He's ordering you to hand me over. He's ordering the good daughter to do what she's told. Clara's voice was very quiet. That's what he calls me in there. The one who does what she's told. Wyatt, that's who I was my whole life. That's the girl who got on the train. He's counting on her still being here. And is she? It was the only question that mattered, and he asked it plain, no softening, the way he asked everything. Clara took the letter back out of his hand. She folded it once, the crease her father had made, and then she walked to the fire and held it over the flames and looked Wyatt Callahan dead in the eye while she let it go. Clara caught. It curled. Her father's cramped hand blackened and vanished. There's your loving father, eaten up in a lick of orange. And Clara stood there and watched it burn to nothing and did not look away from Wyatt for one single second. No, she said, she's not here anymore. She got off the train 2,000 miles ago, and I've been becoming somebody else ever since. The last of the letter drifted up the chimney as ash. That's my answer to my father. That's my answer to Holloway. And that's my answer to you. Wyatt Callahan looked at her across the burning light. Something in his face broke open, not the crack she'd seen the first day. Not the small thaw, but something whole and startled and almost frightened. "Clara," he said, and his voice wasn't steady anymore either. "Do you understand what you just did?" "I burned my family's forgiveness," she said. "I know exactly what I did. If you'd done what he said, told Holloway everything, turn me over, your family's debt is forgiven. Whole. There's free. Your sister's safe. You could go home." "I don't have a home," Clara said. "I have a family that sold me and a man who told me not to walk in the dark. But I know which one I'm keeping." And that was when Wyatt crossed the room. Sure. He didn't take her in his arms. It wasn't that kind of moment, that kind of man. Not yet. But he took both her hands in both of his and held them hard between them. And he looked down at her with the firelight moving on his face. "Turbo." And he said the truest thing he had ever said to another living soul. "I judged you the day you got down off that wagon," he said. "Looked at how you came here, and I decided who you were before you'd said 10 words. I was wrong. God help me. I've never been so wrong about anybody in my life. You're the only person who's ever come to this ranch and told me the truth when a lie would have served you better." Every single time, his hands tightened. "I don't know what this is between us. I'm not a man who's good at knowing. I know you burned your own way home rather than betray me. So I'd burn this whole ranch to the ground before I let anything happen to you. And if that doesn't, it is," Clara said softly. "Whatever it is, it is." For a moment they just stood there, locked, the fire settling, two people who'd each spent their lives being decided about, finally, quietly choosing. And then Wyatt let go, and the softness went out of his face, and the ranchman came back, because a man who's just found something worth protecting is a man who's suddenly got everything to lose. "Right," he said. "Then we've got maybe a fortnight before Holloway walks up that road expecting a spy. When he gets here and finds out he doesn't have one, he'll move to take the ranch outright," Clara finished. "More slow bleed. He'll call the notes or force the sale, however it is his lawyers have been building toward all this time. Which means we've got a fortnight to make sure that when he tries," Wyatt's jaw set. "You said the county records show his liens against my land. You said territory provisioning was registered by a lawyer for a client with no name. Well, if we can prove in front of a judge that Holloway's been running a fraud to manufacture the very debt he's using to squeeze me, then his paper's no good. A note built on fraud won't hold." He stopped. "We can't prove it from inside this kitchen. Half of what we need is at the county seat, and the other half is in a locked box in my tack room that Dun'll burn the second he smells trouble. Then we get it before he smells anything," Clara said. The getting of it turned out to be the hardest thing either of them had ever done, because Hollis Dunn was not a stupid man. Whatever else he was, Hollis Dunn had smelled something the day he rode into the yard and found her standing outside his tack room with the story that didn't quite fit. He'd been watching her ever since. Clara felt it. The way you feel a draft in a house, you can't see it. A door's open somewhere. Dunn was always just at the edge of things now. When she crossed the yard, he was mending tack where he could see her go. When she sat at the kitchen table with her papers, go past the window twice as often as a man's work should carry him past. But he never said a word out of place. He tipped his hat. Miss Whitmore, soft and polite. And every ounce of it was a man circling, deciding. "He knows," she told Wyatt one night, at the table. "Not what, exactly. But he knows I'm not what I said. He's waiting for me to make a mistake. Then don't make one." "I'm trying not to. Wyatt, I need that box. The physical invoices, the originals in Dunn's own hand. My copies are good, but a lawyer for Holloway will say I forged them. We need the originals, and we need them somewhere. Dunn can't reach them to burn." Wyatt was quiet a moment. "I'd take them," he said. "It's my tack room, my box. Walk in tomorrow in the daylight, in front of God and everybody, and take my own property. Not a thing Dunn can say about it without admitting he cares what's inside." It was a good plan. Well, it was a bold plan, and Clara loved him a little for the plainness of it. The way he'd just walk up in the daylight and take what was his. The corners. It went wrong from the first minute, because when Wyatt walked into the tack room the next morning and reached up to the high shelf behind the bridles, the box was gone. He came back to the house with his face like a thunderhead. "Our empty shelf," he said. "Dust ring's still there." He moved it. In the last 3 days, he moved the whole box. Clara's stomach dropped. Then he knows we're after it. He knows something's after it. Wyatt dragged a hand down his face. If he's moved that box, he's moved it somewhere. I can't just walk up and take it. And if he thinks it's not safe on the ranch at all, he'll give it to Holloway," Clara said, "or burn it. Either way, it's gone. And it's the one thing that proves the fraud from the inside." And that was the first real turn of the screw. See, the moment the thing they needed most slipped out of reach. But it was not the worst thing that happened that week. First thing happened 3 days later, and it happened to Wyatt. Put out to the South Range alone, against his own rule. He'd made her swear, but he was a proud man, and it was his own land, and he'd done it 10,000 times, and his horse came back at dusk without him. It was in the yard when it came in. Saddle empty, reins trailing, the animal lathered and spooked and blowing hard. Something in her went cold and clear and very, very quiet. "Every man who's not a thief," she said to the nearest hand. Her voice came out so level it frightened him. "Lanterns. Now, Mr. Callahan went south and he's on foot or he's down, and we find him tonight or we don't find him at all. They found him near midnight, of a dry wash where the bank had given way. His horse had gone over in the dark and thrown him, and he'd come down hard on rock. And he was breathing, but he was not awake, and there was blood black in his hair." Clara didn't scream. She didn't weep. Later, she would wonder at how still she'd gone. Every soft thing in her had turned to iron the second she'd needed it to. Get him up out of that wash. She got him home. She sent the fastest rider on the fastest horse for the doctor 40 miles off, and she sat by Wyatt Callahan's bed through the whole of that black night with a cloth and a basin, saying his name low, and even telling him to stay, telling him she wasn't done with him yet, telling him he did not get to leave her in this house full of liars now, not when she'd just decided to keep him. And somewhere in the deepest part of that night, when she was alone with him and half out of her mind with fear, the earliest thought she'd ever had crawled up out of the dark. Hers doesn't just go over a bank, it's walked 1,000 times. She held the thought at arm's length. She looked at it, and she made herself finish it, because Clara Whitmore had learned the hard way that the truths you won't look at are the ones that kill you, unless somebody wanted it to. The doctor came at dawn, gray and rumpled, and he worked over Wyatt a long time. And when he came out, he told Clara that Wyatt had a cracked head and 2 cracked ribs and a great deal of luck, that he'd live, most likely if the fever stayed down. Clara thanked him and paid him and saw him off, and then she went and found Hollis Dunn. He was in the barn, Miss Whitmore. He tipped his hat. Horrible thing about the boss. "How's he faring?" "He'll live," Clara said, and moved behind Dunn's eyes. Just a flicker. But she'd been reading desperate men's faces since she was 19, and she knew disappointment when she saw a man try to swallow it. "He'll live." There again, softer, watching him. "I look surprised, Mr. Dunn." "I'm glad of it," Dunn said. "Oh, glad he'll pull through. Who saddled his horse yesterday?" The question landed in the barn like a dropped stone. His horse, the gray. Who saddled it, and who checked the tack before he rode out? Dunn's face didn't change, but his hands did. She watched them, and she saw the fingers go still, the way a man's hands go still when his whole body is suddenly listening. "Hands saddle their own mounts," he said. "You know that." "Man saddles his own horse out here." "Mr. Callahan saddled his own horse," Clara agreed. "The cinch, Mr. Dunn. The cinch on that saddle didn't break at the buckle where leather wears through honest. I looked at it last night after we brought him in. 2/3 through, clean, on the underside where a man wouldn't see it swinging up, so it'd hold it a walk and let go the first time he asked that horse to run. The barn was very quiet. She had not, in fact, looked at the cinch. It had been dark, and she'd been trying to keep a man alive. She'd learned something else. At 19, At her father's supper table, creditors, sometimes you say the thing that must be true as though you already know it's true. Watch the guilty man's face tell you whether you guessed right. Miss Dunn's face told her she'd guessed right. It was only there for a heartbeat, the quick, voluntary flinch of a man, hearing that the evidence he thought he'd destroyed still existed. It was gone, smoothed over, and he was just a foreman looking sorrowful in a barn. Wild thing to say, Miss Whitmore, he said quietly. An accident. A man could take offense. A man could, Clara agreed. An innocent one. Especially. Is that what you're telling me you are? For a long moment they looked at each other across the barn. The young woman and the man twice her size, and both of them understood that the polite pretending was over now, the same as her father's letter. You want to be real careful, Dunn said. There was no softness in it anymore, none at all. Us is laid up. Doctor says weeks of bed if the fever don't take him first. And that leaves this whole outfit, every hand, every horse, every mile of it in the hands of a foreman who's run it 15 years. He took one step toward her. Or in the hands of a city girl with no ring, no husband, no standing, and a whole lot of accusations she can't prove. You think on which of us the men out here will follow? Miss Whitmore. You think real hard on that. Because with the boss laid up, this ranch is mine to run. And I don't much want you running loose in it. And there it was the twist she should have seen coming. And hadn't, she'd been too busy being afraid for Wyatt to be afraid for herself. Quiet down. Dunn didn't have to sneak anymore. He didn't have to steal in the night. The one man whose authority protected her was flat on his back with a cracked skull. The man who'd tried to kill him was standing in the barn telling her, this day, that the ranch was his now. Clara Whitmore had never in her life been in so much danger, and she knew it. So she did the only thing she'd ever known how to do when the ground gave way beneath her. She refused to show it. You're right, she said, and her voice was steady as stone. Thus, you've run this outfit 15 years. The men know you. I'm a city girl with no ring and no standing and a stack of accusations. She took her own step toward him, closing the distance he'd opened until she had to look up at him and didn't care. I've already written all of it down, Mr. Dunn. Every number, every date, every cut cinch, twice over. One copy somewhere you'll never find, and the other's on its way to the county sheriff by a rider who left this morning while you were busy looking sorrowful in this barn. She smiled at him, sweet and cold, so you go on and run the ranch. Run it real careful. Because the second Mr. Callahan opens his eyes, or the sheriff opens my letter, whoever comes first, you're going to wish you'd never heard the name Whitmore. A quiet substitute. You got the one woman on God's earth who wrote it all down. It was a bluff. Half of it was a bluff. There was no rider, no letter to the sheriff, not yet. But the copies were real, and the numbers were real. I had learned that a lie wrapped around a true thing is the hardest kind for a guilty man to call. Miss Dunn did not call it. She watched him weigh it, watched him run the odds, kill her now and hope there was no rider, no copy, or let her live and hope she was bluffing about all of it. Watched a man who'd already cut one cinch decide whether to cut a rope. Attend your boss, he said finally, thick. Go on. And Clara turned her back on him, the hardest thing she'd ever done, turning her back on a man who'd tried to kill for less, and walked out of that barn at an ordinary pace, one step at a time, and did not run, and did not look back. Let herself shake when the kitchen door was shut and barred behind her. That time. She didn't know how much, but she'd bought it. Now she had to make it real. The writer that afternoon, a young hand named Toby who was too green to be in on any scheme and too devoted to Wyatt to be bought, and she sent him not to the sheriff, but to the one place she'd realized she needed more seat, the recorder's office, with a list in her own hand of every single document she needed pulled and copied and witnessed under the recorder's own seal. The sheriff could be Holloway's man for all she knew. A sealed county record was a fact, and facts were the only weapons she had that Dunn couldn't cut through with a knife in the dark. Then she went back to Wyatt. The fever came that night. The doctor had feared, and it came hard. Wyatt Callahan burned and shook and said things that made no sense. And once near dawn, Without a name not hers, older name, a woman's name she didn't know, from some grief he'd never told her about. And Clara held his hand through all of it and did not let go. Then she told him, low, over and over, you don't get to leave. I burned my whole life to stay here with you, Wyatt Callahan. And you do not get to leave me in this house alone with those men. You stay, you hear me? You stay and you fight, and when you wake up, we finish this together. We said stay. And near the third dawn, the fever broke. Eyes opened, cracked, glassy, fused but open. He rasped, I'm here. The rasped. Went over. Wyatt, somebody cut your cinch. She leaned close. It was no accident. He tried to kill you. She watched it land. Watched the understanding move through his fevered eyes. Watched, even weak as a kitten, even flat on his back, the ranchman's fury kindle in him. Done, he breathed. Done. And Dunn thinks he's running this ranch now because you're down. He as good as told me so. He's got the men, 15 years of them. And he moved the box. I don't know where, and I've got copies, but I need the originals. And he sent Toby to the county seat for the sealed records, but he's not back, and I don't know if he's safe. And her voice cracked, only after 3 days of iron. And I've been so afraid. I've been so afraid you wouldn't wake up and I'd have to do this alone. Wyatt's hand found hers, but his. You're not alone, he said. You're not ever going to be alone again. I promise you that. He swallowed, and it cost him. Help me understand where we stand. All of it. Just spare me, where do we stand? So she told him. Everything. Done in the barn, the bluff about the rider and the sheriff. Toby gone to the county seat, the box missing, the 2 weeks nearly up. Wyatt lay there and listened, with his jaw tight against the pane. When she was done, he was quiet a long moment. You bluffed Hollis Dunn, he said finally. Not killing you. Standing in my barn, alone, but with me laid up and no man to back you. I didn't have a better idea. Clara. He said her name like it hurt him worse than the ribs. A man in this territory who'd have had the nerve. And you did it in a dress with no weapon and a bluff. His hand tightened on hers. I've spent my whole life thinking the bravest thing a person could do was face a man down with a gun. I was wrong about that too. You faced him down with nothing but nerve and a stack of paper he couldn't see. That's the bravest thing I ever heard of. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to do it alone again. And Clara, 3 days without sleep, all out of her mind with fear and relief, the iron finally cracking, put her head down on the edge of his bed and wept. Wyatt Callahan laid his weak, shaking hand on her hair, and neither of them said anything at all because there wasn't anything left that needed saying. He came back the next day. He came back hard, at a gallop, and he came back scared, and he came back with a saddlebag full of sealed county records and a piece of news that turned everything on its head. Miss Whitmore. He could barely get it out. He was breathing so hard. The records, all of them, sealed just like you wrote. But ma'am, there's a man at the county seat. Come in on the stage 2 days ago. Fine clothes, 2 men with him, a lawyer. And the recorder's clerk got to talking, and he said, ma'am. He said, the man's been asking about the Callahan Ranch, asking when the notes come due, asking who runs it while the owner's laid up. Toby swallowed. I didn't give my name. I didn't say who sent me. But ma'am, I think it's him. Hello. I think it's Holloway. And he's not coming in a fortnight. Already here. Clara felt the floor tilt. 2 days early, Holloway was already here, already at the county seat 40 miles off, already asking the exact questions of a man who wanted to know how hard he'd have to push to take a wounded man's land. He knew Wyatt was hurt. Somehow, he already knew. Which meant word had traveled, which meant Dunn had gotten a message out, which meant the two of them, the inside hand and the outside mind, were already talking, already moving, already closing the trap, while Wyatt lay in his bed, too weak to stand. How long? Wyatt said from the bed. His voice was stronger than it had been. Not strong enough, not near strong enough. How long till he rides out here? A day, Clara said. At the outside. He's just waiting to be sure of his footing. Then we've got a day. Wyatt tried to sit up. The pain took him, and he went white and fell back. Clara was at his side in an instant, with her hands on his shoulders, letting him down. No, she said. No, you don't. You crack your head open again, and I lose the one man on this ranch worth a damn away wins for certain. You lie still. Sure. That's your job now. Clara, I can't fight a land war flat. You're not going to fight it, Clara said. Something in her voice stopped him. I am. He stared at her. Look, you're too hurt to face Holloway, she said, low and fast and certain. I'm not. I'm the piece he thinks he's got, remember? There's daughter, the spy he's expecting. He doesn't know I burned that letter. No, I turned. As far as Graham Holloway knows, when he rides up that road, he's going to be met by a scared little debtor's daughter who will hand him everything he wants. Her eyes were bright and hard. So let him think it. Let him walk up here sure of his footing. And let me be standing on that porch when he does with every sealed record from that county seat, every copy I made, and a witness he doesn't know about, and let me be the last thing that man ever expects. Wyatt looked at her for a long moment, and Clara watched him fight it, the man who wanted to protect her, who'd sworn she'd never stand alone again, warring with the man who could see, clear as she could, that this was the only move left on the board. He's dangerous, Wyatt said finally, quietly. Not like Dunn. Dunn's a hired knife. Holloway's the man who ruins whole families with a signature and never gets his hands dirty. Sir, he broke your father. He's broken half this valley. Then to stand alone in front of him and spring a trap. Not alone, Clara said. You'll be right inside that door. Weak as you are, you'll be there, and Toby, and every hand who's loyal, and the sealed records and the truth. She took his hand. I've been a piece on this man's board my whole life. Wyatt. He moved my father. He moved me. He's been moving people like us since before I knew his name. Well, I'm done being moved. When Graham Holloway rides up that road, I'm going to find out that the last piece he placed got up off the board and turned into the hand that flips the whole table over. And Wyatt Callahan bruised, burning still with the last of the fever, looking up at the woman who'd come to his ranch as a substitute and become the only thing standing between him and ruin, did the only thing left that he could do. He squeezed her hand and he said, then let's set the table. That night, he landed out every word, every paper, every man's place, the wounded rancher and the debtor's daughter bent close over the lamp, the trap that would spring the second Graham Holloway set foot on Callahan land, laid out the sealed records in the order she'd hand them over. Wyatt named the hands he'd trust with his life and the ones he wouldn't trust with a bucket. Somewhere out in the dark of the yard, Hollis Dunn watched the lamp burn late in the sickroom window and knew, the way a guilty man always knows, that whatever was coming for him too. Miles off, in a hotel at the county seat, in fine clothes, finished his supper, and told his lawyer they'd ride out to the Callahan place in the morning to collect, he said, on an old debt, and to see about a young woman he was expecting to find very cooperative indeed. Adam Holloway had no idea. He thought he was riding out to close a trap he'd been building for 2 years. He was riding into one that had been built in 3 days by a woman he'd mistaken for a pawn, who had spent her entire life being underestimated by men exactly him, and who had finally, at long last, found something worth all the nerve she'd been saving up. The sun came up over Callahan land. Clara Whitmore was standing on the porch in a clean dress with a leather folio of sealed records in her hands, watching the north road, dry-eyed and steady and ready, waiting for the dust. The dust came at mid-morning. Clara saw it long before she saw the men, 3 riders on the north road. The unhurried, the pace of men who believed they were coming to collect something already owed, did not move from the porch. Behind her, through the open door, Wyatt was propped in a chair just inside the threshold where he could hear every word and not be seen too weak to stand a full hour, enough to be a witness, and stubborn enough to have refused the bed when she'd tried to keep him in it. Abby was in the barn with the loyal hands. The leather folio of sealed records sat on the porch rail under Clara's hand. Hollis Dunn stood at the bottom of the porch steps, as Clara had wanted him there. She'd sent word at dawn that Mr. Holloway was coming and the foreman ought to be present to receive him. Dunn had come, and he stood there now, not knowing whether he was being invited to a victory or walked to a gallows. Riders came into the yard and stopped. The man in the middle swung down first. Knew him before he'd said a word, though she'd never once seen his face. She knew him by the clothes that had never seen honest work, soft hands, and most of all, by the way, his eyes moved over the ranch, over the house. The land the way a man looks at a thing he's already decided is his. Miss Whitmore, Graham Holloway said, and took off his hat and smiled. I'd have known you anywhere. You've your father's look about the eyes, Mr. Holloway. You're expecting me. Good, your father wrote that you're a sensible girl. He came towards the stairs, easy, unhurried, a lawyer and a hard-faced man flanking him. Then let's not waste a fine morning. I've come a long way, and I think you and I can conclude our business quick and clean. Everybody walks away happy. Your family's debt forgiven. This ranch changing hands to a man who'll actually run it right. His eyes flicked others once to Dunn at the foot of the steps. And you, on the next stage home, free and clear, having done exactly what was asked of you. And what was asked of me, Clara said, was to hand you Mr. Callahan's weaknesses, his debts, accounts, everything I'd learned in his house. Just so. Holloway smiled wider. You've learned a great deal. I have, Clara said. Learned more than you can imagine. And she picked up the leather folio. Holloway put out his hand for it, and this was the moment Clara saw the whole thing balanced on the edge of it. 2 years of his scheming, and the 3 days of hers, all of it about to tip one way or the other, and she held the folio a moment longer, Graham Holloway dead in the eye, and did not hand it to him. I give you this, she said. I want to be sure we understand each other. The man who holds my father's debt, the debt that sent me west. Right? Is that what it is, and you'll forgive it. Oh, in writing, if I give you what's in this folio, every penny. Holloway's patience was that of a man who'd already won. My word, your word. Clara turned that over. Her down, signed, witnessed. Something flickered across Holloway's face, the first small crack, the first hint that this girl was asking sharper questions than a scared debtor's daughter ought to. But he covered it, because a man like Graham Holloway had spent a lifetime learning to cover. He said, I've a document drawn up already. Here has it. Sign over what you know, and I sign the forgiveness. Sir, we're both bound. He gestured, and the lawyer stepped forward with a leather case, prepared to deal fair. Fair, Clara repeated softly. And then she opened the folio. Then let's deal fair away, she said. Let's put all our papers on the rail here and read them out loud. Here it is. Everyone, so nobody can say later they were cheated. Show me your forgiveness. I'll show you what I know about Mr. Callahan's affairs, and Mr. Dunn here can witness the whole exchange. Ever since he's run this ranch 15 years and knows its business better than any man. She smiled at Dunn, complete and terrible. That right, Mr. Dunn? Hollis Dunn had gone very still at the bottom of the step. He said, thick, fair's fair. Wonderful. Clara laid the first paper on the rail. I'll begin. Since you want to know Mr. Callahan's affairs, I see. Mr. Holloway, let me tell you what I've learned about them. Let me tell you all of it. Because you're right, I've learned a great deal in this house, and I don't intend to leave a single thing out. And she began to read what he expected. Not weaknesses, not debts to exploit, but the soft places in Wyatt Callahan's defenses. She read him the county record of territory provisioning, registered 18 months prior by a lawyer for a client whose name was not listed. She read the payments out of Wyatt's account to a company that owned no warehouse, no wagon, no sack of feed. She read the delivery invoices signed in Hollis Dunn's own square hand 30, sacks received on the 4th of the month, a day when no wagon had ever come up the road. Holloway's smile did not move. Eyes did. This is quite a story, he said. I don't see what a foreman's petty thieving has to do with I'm not finished. Clara laid down the next page. $1,000. Mr. Holloway bled out of this ranch over 18 months through a company that doesn't exist, for by a foreman who can't set up a company at the county seat because he can't read past a supply list. She looked up. Somebody set it up for him. Somebody with a lawyer. Somebody with money already and a reason to want this ranch bled dry, and this man too broke to hold his notes. She let it hang. And here's the thing I keep coming back to, Mr. Holloway. Who holds those notes? Who bought up Wyatt Callahan's paper the winter the herds died? And nobody else would. Who's been squeezing this valley for 2 years with money in one hand and a fake feed company in the other? The yard had gone dead silent. You're reaching, girl, Holloway said. Ben, and the ease had gone out of his voice. Laid down the next sealed record, and the next faster now, building it stone by stone the way she'd built everything. Here's the lien you hold against this land. Here's the note, due in 9 days. How convenient, 9 days. Numbers. Here's the county registration of territory provisioning. Hello. Here, Mr. Holloway. Here is the lawyer's name who registered it. There's the same lawyer standing at your elbow right now, holding your leather case. Every head in the yard turned to the lawyer. Numbers, the man went white. That's a common enough, the lawyer started. Don't, Holloway said low to him. Just that. Don't. And in that one word, that one crack in his composure, Holloway told the whole yard everything. Clara pressed. She could feel it now, the way you feel a card game turning when the other man's hand goes bad. You built the debt you're collecting on, she said. Whole scheme, isn't it? You didn't just wait for Wyatt Callahan to fail. You made him fail. You paid Dunn to bleed the ranch. It couldn't make its notes. So you could call the paper you already held and take the land clean. And when that was too slow, you decided to hurry it along. Her voice dropped. Dunn cut the cinch on a man's saddle. Mr. Holloway, you tried to make a widow of a woman who isn't even a wife, so you could deal with a corpse's estate instead of a living man. Business. That's murder. Planned in a hotel 40 miles off. A boy in that barn who heard your own clerk say you'd been asking how long the notes had till they came due. That's enough. Holloway's voice cracked out hard now. The softness gone. That is enough. You've got a stack of paper and a wild story, and not one thing that would stand in front of a judge. Copies, guesses, the word of a debtor's daughter, and a stable boy against a man of standing. He took a step up onto the first stair. A hard-faced man moved with him, and Clara saw the shape of what he meant to do, bluster. And if that failed, worse. You've overplayed your hand more badly. Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to hand me that folio, the real records, the sealed ones, and you're going to get on the next stage, and you're going to be very glad I'm a patient man. Because the alternative is that a young woman with no husband, no standing, and a great many enemies has a very unfortunate accident on a dangerous frontier. Nobody would blink. It was a threat meant to break her. It had broken stronger people. Clara had watched it break her own father across a supper table. She did not break. You're right about one thing, she said. I'm as still water. Copies wouldn't stand in front of a judge. Because my word against yours wouldn't. She set the folio down on the rail. Is exactly why I didn't build this case on copies and guesses, and my word, there was Mr. Holloway. I built it on the one thing you can't call a forgery. Your own inside man's hand on the original invoices against the sworn word of the men who were here. You know what the beautiful thing is? She turned to the bottom of the steps. Your inside man is standing right there, she said, and he's just now working out that you were always going to hang him for this. Aren't you, Mr. Holloway? A foreman who can't read, who signed his own name to every fraudulent invoice, got the cinch with his own hands. Why? If this ever came to a judge, there's your guilty man, ready-made, done swings, and you're just an investor who was cheated by a crooked foreman, same as Callahan was. You never meant to forgive my father's debt either. Did you? You never meant to let me walk away. You don't leave pieces on the board once they've served their turn. There's going to hang for the debt, whether I helped you or not. And Dunn's going to hang for the fraud. And I was going to have my very unfortunate accident. You were going to bury all three of us and walk off with the ranch clean. She watched the words land on Hollis Dunn like blows. Watched the man who'd tried to kill for Holloway understand, finally in front of everybody, exactly what he'd been to Holloway all along. A partner, a tool, a thing to be used and then thrown to the law when the law came looking. A lie. Holloway said quickly, too quickly. Don't listen to her. She's trying to turn you. We've got an understanding. You told me Dunn said slowly, "Ain't gonna be no paper. You told me the box was safe. Told me if it ever came to it, your lawyer'd bury the whole thing and I'd walk with my cut." He was staring at Holloway now, as his face had gone gray. "And now she's standing up there, reading my own hand off sealed county records. And you're telling me to hand her my—" "Dunn, you was gonna hang me." Dunn said it wondering. "Almost. The way a man says a thing he can't quite believe, even as he knows it's true. Whole time. If it ever come down, it was always going to be me swinging and you walking. Wasn't it? Wasn't it?" And this was the twist Clara had gambled everything on, not that she could beat Graham Holloway with paper, as paper alone might not have been enough, but that she could turn his own knife in his hand. The fastest way to break a scheme built by two men was to make each of them understand the other had been planning to sacrifice him all along. That's Pearl. She'd been underestimated her whole life by men who thought they were using her. She knew, better than anyone alive, exactly what it did to a person to realize they'd been the tool and not the hand. "They're a box, Mr. Dunn?" Clara asked, quiet into the ringing silence. "They're the originals, the ones you moved from the tack room. He's going to hang you with them. Or you can hand them to me, testify to who paid you, and let the law take a foreman who was used instead of a foreman who plotted. A door left open to you. He closed all the others when he decided you were the one who'd swing." For a long, terrible moment, Hollis Dunn stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, between the man who'd paid him and the woman who'd trapped him, the whole thing balanced on which fear won. Then Graham Holloway made his mistake. "Don't be a fool, Dunn," he snapped. "She's got nothing without those originals, and you know it. Here, keep your mouth shut and your head down, and this all goes away. You start talking, and I promise you'll find out what happens to men who cross me. Remember what I'm capable of. You remember what we did to that saddle." His voice dropped to something vicious. "Us. You're in this to the neck the same as me. You cut that sin. You, not me. So you'll keep quiet or you'll hang alone." And that "you'll hang alone" was the thing that broke Hollis Dunn, because it was the truth, said out loud in front of witnesses. Holloway had just confirmed, in his own vicious voice, of a wounded rancher listening through an open door and a boy in a barn and a yard full of hands, that the cinch had been cut, that Dunn had cut it. Holloway meant to let him hang alone for it. Dunn's face changed. The fear curdled into something else, the flat, old rage of a man who's just watched the last of his illusions die. "In the smokehouse," he said, loud, clear, to Holloway. "The box, buried under the floor, in an oilcloth, every original invoice. The judge who paid me for everyone. I'll tell him whose idea the cinch was, because it sure as hell wasn't mine. You drew it out for me on the back of a feed bill." Cowboy told me 2/3 through and let the horse do the rest. He was breathing hard. "Want me to hang alone? Then I'll make good, and sure I don't." Graham Holloway's face came apart. For one instant, just one, the mask dropped entirely. Saw underneath it the thing that had ruined her father and half the valley. A mastermind, a great dark power, a greedy man who'd bet everything on nobody ever catching him. Watching it all come down in a ranch yard because a foreman he'd meant to sacrifice had decided not to go quietly. Cowboy did the only thing a cornered man like that has left. He reached for the hard-faced man beside him, reached to give the order Clara had known might come, the order that turned a land war into a killing, and his mouth opened to say, "Take her." "I wouldn't," said Wyatt Callahan. He was standing in the doorway. He'd gotten up out of the chair. God knew what it had cost him. As death, one hand braced hard against the frame, the other holding his rifle level and steady despite it all. And behind him and around the yard, sound of his voice, the loyal hands came out of the barn, of the bunkhouse, and the others, quiet and grim and armed, closing the yard the way Clara and Wyatt had planned it in the lamplight the night before. "My cinch," Wyatt said, in his voice, like as he was, across that silent yard like a judge's. "You've been robbing my land for 18 months and squeezing this whole valley for 2 years, and you just confessed to a murder you tried to commit on me, in my own yard in front of a dozen witnesses, and the woman you came here to threaten. I'd think real careful Holloway about what your man's hand does next. Because there's a whole lot of us and only three of you, and every single one of us heard you say what we did to that saddle. The hard-faced man looked at the rifles around the yard and did the arithmetic and took his hand off his gun. And Graham Holloway, the man who ruined families with a signature, once gotten his own hands dirty, who'd been so sure he was riding out to collect on a trap 2 years in the making, stood in the middle of the Callahan yard and understood that he had lost. Beaten, not by a rancher's rifle or a sheriff's badge, or by a young woman with a folio of sealed papers who'd taken every ugly thing she'd ever learned about how men like him destroy people, a bit patient and pitiless, back on him. "You're finished," Clara told him. There was no triumph in it, only a kind of tired iron. "The originals are in the smokehouse. Your own man will testify against you. They registered the company, and half the county recorder's office can prove it. And the note you meant to call, in 9 days it was built on fraud, or $1 of it, and there isn't a judge in this territory who'll let you collect a penny of a debt you manufactured to steal a man's land. Over, Mr. Holloway. You just didn't lose to who you thought you'd lose to. They sent for the sheriff, the real one, from 2 counties over, a man Wyatt trusted, and they held Holloway and his lawyer and his hard-faced man in the yard through the long afternoon, sat apart with his head in his hands. A broken man who'd chosen the one door left to him. And when the sheriff came and heard it all and read the sealed records and dug the oilcloth box out from under the smokehouse floor with his own hands, irons on Graham Holloway in the same yard where Holloway had meant to put Clara on a stage or in a grave. "You'll want to know," Sheriff told Wyatt, low, he rode out with his prisoners, "the note against your land's frozen the second a judge sees fraud, and he'll see it inside a week with what this girl's put together. You're not losing this ranch, Callahan. You're not losing anything." She saw to that. He looked at Clara with something like wonder. "Miss, I've been sheriffing 20 years, and I never seen a case built tighter by a lawyer, let alone by a woman," Clara said. "By anybody," the sheriff said. At it all. And then they were gone. The dust of their going trailing down the north road, where Holloway's dust had come up that morning. It was quiet, and it was over. Clara stood on the porch and felt the strength go out of her. All at once, 3 days of iron. The fear and the fever and the bluff in the barn and the whole terrible morning, all of it draining out through her feet. And she swayed. And then Wyatt was there. He shouldn't have been standing. Or he shouldn't have crossed the porch. But he did, one hand still braced on whatever he could reach her, and he got his arm around her before she could fall, her Balkans, and the two of them stood there holding each other up, each too weak to stand alone, which was, Clara thought, half hysterically, right, about exactly right. "You did it," Wyatt said into her hair. "My God, Clara, you beat him. We did it." "No." He pulled back enough to look at her, his face pale, drawn alight. "I lay in a doorway with a rifle." "You beat him. You walked out on that porch alone and faced down the man who broke up your family, and you turned his own knife around and put it through him, and you never once, not once, flinched." His voice cracked. "I have never in my life seen anything like you. I don't think there's ever been anything like you. Wyatt, let me say it. Trying to say it for 2 weeks, and I've been too much a coward and a fool." He was still holding her up, and she was still holding him. "The day you got down off that wagon, I looked at how you came here, substituted another man's leftover promise, and I decided you were a mistake I'd been handed. I judged you by the manner of your arriving, and every single day since, you've shown me I was wrong. You told me the truth when a lie would have saved you. A thief in my house. You bluffed a killer in my barn. You burned your own family's forgiveness rather than betray me. And then you sat by bed for 3 nights and told a dying man to stay." His hand came up to her face. "You came to this ranch because someone else decided your future. But you stayed, and you fought, and you saved everything I've ever built because your own honest heart chose to. Nobody sent you into that yard this morning. Nobody made you. You chose me." Clara's eyes were streaming, and she didn't care. She said, "I chose you. The first thing in my whole life that was ever fully mine to choose, they chose you, and I'd do it again 1,000 times over. then choose it once more. And Wyatt Callahan, a man good at knowing his own heart, who'd spent the whole of his life behind a wall, not at the woman who'd knocked it clean over, but because your family sent you, not because a fare was paid or a debt was owed or a marriage was arranged to replace your sister or fill a hole or settle an account of it. I'm asking you to stay because I love you, Clara Whitmore, and because you're the only person who ever came to this place and chose me back. Me. Not the arrangement, not the bargain. Me. And Clara Whitmore, who had traveled 2,000 miles as a substitute, or a scandal, a payment on another woman's promise, who had been decided about her whole life by fathers and sisters, and men who mistook her kindness for weakness, who had finally, in a ranch yard in Montana Territory, a woman that no one would ever again dare to tell what she was worth, looked up at the one man who'd asked her to choose for herself. Yes, she said. By my own choice, Wyatt. Yes, and when he kissed her, weak and trembling and holding her up while she held him up, in the yard where she'd beaten the man who'd meant to destroy them both, it was the first thing either of them had ever been given that neither one had been sent or arranged into. It was simply freely theirs. The word came back from the county seat 9 days later, and it came the way Clara had promised Wyatt it would. Claire brought it a clerk's hand, not Toby's this time, and Clara read it standing on the porch where she'd faced Holloway down, and then she read it again, and then she went inside to where Wyatt sat by the window, now, the color back in his face, and she laid the paper in his lap without a word. Read it out loud, Wyatt said. I want to hear you say it. The note is void. Her voice caught. Judge looked at the sealed records and the originals from the smokehouse and Dunn's testimony, and he ruled the debt fraudulent, every dollar of it built on a company that never existed. Holloway's entire. Holloway can't collect a penny. The ranch is yours, Wyatt. Free clear. Nobody holds your paper anymore. Nobody's coming up that road to take it. She looked up. Her eyes were bright. It's over. It's really over. Wyatt was quiet a long moment. Say the other part, he said. You're not saying. Because he'd learned to read her by then, the way she'd learned to read him, and he'd seen there was more in the letter than the ranch. Clara sat down slowly across from him. Holloway's held for trial. Fraud and conspiracy and the attempt on your life. Dunn's testifying against him, whole, in exchange for the court going easier he'll do years. Don't hang because he turned. And the judge's letter says she stopped. It says the fraud case is going to reach past Montana. Holloway had paper on families in 3 states. And when they unwind it all, every debt he built the same crooked way is going to be examined. She swallowed. My father's. Wyatt understood at once. Your family's debt might be as fraudulent as yours, built the same way by the same man to squeeze the same kind of desperate people. Clara looked down at her hands. If the court finds it, my father might not be ruined after all. Or might not owe a thing. The debt that sent me west could turn out to have been a lie from the start. She should have felt joy at it. She waited to feel it. And what came instead was something more complicated. Something that sat heavy in her chest. And Wyatt, watching her, set the judge's letter aside and reached across and took her hand. All good news to you, he said. Tell me why. Because it means they didn't have to send me. The words came out low and raw. If the debt was fraud, if there was a way to fight it, then my father didn't have to put me on that train. My sister didn't have to be replaced with me. They could have fought, could have kept me. And instead, the first thing my father did when the pressure came was decide which daughter he could most afford to lose. Her voice broke. I've spent 2 weeks telling myself I chose to leave all that behind. Me kept a door open, kept thinking, when it's all settled, I'll write to them. I'll go back. They'll see who I turned out to be. Little letters telling me the whole thing was built on nothing. And they gave me away for nothing. And I don't. She pressed her free hand to her mouth. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to forgive it. I don't even know if I should. And Wyatt Callahan, who was not a man good with soft things, did the wisest thing he had ever done. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't tell her what to feel. He just held her hand and let her grieve the family she'd lost, not the ones who died, the living ones who'd sold her And when she was done, the worst of it had passed through like a fever breaking. He said only, you don't have to decide today. You don't have to decide this year. Forgiveness isn't a debt, Clara. Nobody gets to send you a note calling it due. She looked up at him, sighed. When did you get wise? About the time a woman got down off a wagon and told me the truth I didn't want to hear, Wyatt said. I've been trying to keep up with her ever since. The letter that came the following week was from her father. Clara held it a long time before she opened it, and alone in the small room, off the kitchen, that no longer felt like a servant's room, and not yet like anything else. She'd braced for anger, for an accounting of the forgiveness she'd burned. For you were always the good daughter, and you failed us. Her father wrote like a man who'd had the ground fall out from under him, which she supposed he had. Word of Holloway's arrest had reached Missouri. Blood was known. And her father wrote, in his cramped, familiar hand, that he was sorry, that he'd been a coward and a fool, that he'd believed a rich man's lie because the lie let him do the thing he'd already half wanted to do, which was solve his troubles with the daughter he thought would forgive him for it. Myself, you were strong enough to survive it. There, he wrote. I did not let myself ask whether you should have had to. Clara read it 3 times, and here was the thing she'd not expected. It did not fix anything. The sorry did not undo the train, her name, or the letter ordering her to spy, or the years of being the one who did what she was told. Apology, she understood now, was not a key that unlocked the past. It was just a man, too late, finally saying the true thing. It was the true thing. And Clara had learned to value that above almost everything. Her back. It took her 3 days and 4 ruined drafts. And in the end, it was short. She told him she was alive. She told him she was well. She told him she was marrying Wyatt Callahan, not because anyone had arranged it. She wrote, and she underlined not, but because she'd chosen him and he'd chosen her. Freely, both of them, the way she'd never once been chosen in her father's house. She did not say she forgave him. She wasn't ready, and she'd stopped pretending to be things she wasn't. But she signed it your daughter, Clara, not your loving daughter. The way he'd signed to her, but your daughter, which was true, which she could stand behind. It was, she thought, as she sealed it, the most honest letter that had ever passed between them. Maybe the first one. They were married in the spring. The passes cleared and the whole valley could come. The whole valley came because word had traveled. Well, the way word does on a frontier. At the time the snow melted, there was not a ranch within 50 miles that hadn't heard the story of the substitute bride who'd caught a thief and bluffed a killer and brought down the man who'd been quietly ruining half of them for 2 years. Families who'd owed Holloway paper, who'd lain awake nights the same as Wyatt had, have lost everything. If the fraud had gone another year unchecked, they came to the Callahan ranch to see, with their own eyes, the young woman who'd done what none of them had managed to do. Clara had not expected that. She'd faced them all down when they'd underestimated her done. Hands, Holloway. She did not quite know what to do with a valley full of people who'd come to thank her. They keep looking at me. Here where she murmured to Wyatt. On the morning of the wedding, watching the wagons roll in. Like I don't know what. I came here a scandal, Wyatt. A bride who wasn't even the right one. Half of them heard that version first. They did, Wyatt said. And then they heard the true one. He took her hand. That's the thing about the truth, Clara. It's slower than a lie out of the gate. It wins the long race every time. You taught me that. Nobody out there's thinking about how you arrived anymore. They're thinking about what you did once you got here. And it was true. In their faces, as the day went on, not the wary, ways look of people sizing up a scandal, but something warmer and steadier. An old rancher whose land Holloway had held paper on took both her hands in his and couldn't get the words out, and shook his head with his eyes wet. Who'd nearly lost her family's homestead, pressed a jar of honey into Clara's arms like it was gold and said, for what you did, from all of us for what you did. The men who doubted her, the hands who'd thought she was too young, soft too much, a woman to matter, stood at the edges with their hats in their hands and a new thing in their eyes that Clara recognized because she'd spent her whole life waiting for it and never getting it. Freely given, earned. She married Wyatt under the wide Montana sky, with the whole valley watching, and when she spoke her vows, she spoke them clear and steady, and she meant every word, and not one of the words had been arranged by anybody but herself. Of course, the end of the hard things. Clara had lived too much to believe a wedding was an ending. There were still bad years to come, a drought 2 summers on that nearly broke them, a winter that took a third of the herd, the ordinary griefs and losses that come to everyone who dares to build a life on hard ground. Holloway's trial dragged on for the better part of a year. Clara had to travel to the county seat and testify, had to sit in a courtroom and lay it all out again, in front of a judge and a jury, and the man himself watching her from the defendant's chair with a hatred that would have frightened the girl who'd gotten off the train. It did not frighten the woman who stood in the witness box. The one who did this, Holloway said to her, or after, low and vicious, before the bailiff moved him along. A nothing, a debtor's leftover daughter. I built something that stood for 2 years and you tore it down out of spite. Clara looked at him, really looked last time, at the man who'd cast a shadow over her whole family without her even knowing his name. I didn't tear it down out of spite, Mr. Holloway, she said quietly. Tear it down because it was built on people. My father was one of the bricks. I was one of the bricks. Half that valley was bricks in the thing you built, and you never once thought of us as anything but material. She held his eyes. That was your mistake. You spent your whole life underestimating the people you stepped on. One of them turned out to be able to count. They took him away to serve his years. Clara walked out of that courthouse into the sun and never once looked back. About hers, and that the not looking back was the thing that told her, more than any verdict, that she was finally free of him. That's changed under her hand. Not all at once, not because she set out to change it, but because a place takes the shape of the people who love it. Clara loved it fiercely, and Wyatt loved her. And between the two of them, the Callahan Ranch became something it had never been in all Wyatt's lonely years of building it. Legs were honest now, kept in her clear hand. The outfit ran clean and fair. She hired the hands who'd stayed loyal and paid them square. Bobby, who'd galloped 40 miles with sealed records in his saddlebag and never once asked why she made him foreman before he was 25. In the place Hollis Dunn had held, and there was a rightness to that nobody in the valley failed to see. But the house itself, the big weathered silent house that had felt like a courthouse the day she arrived, filled up with sound. Their voice, their Wyatt's, and in time with others, children who grew up under that wide sky, knowing their mother as the woman who'd saved the ranch, and their father as the man who'd been wise enough to see what he'd been handed. Clara told them the story when they were old enough. Softened. She'd stopped softening things a long time ago. Her grandfather sent me here to marry a man I'd never met, she told them. Because he owed money, and I was the thing he had to give. I came wearing your Aunt Adeline's borrowed promise. There took one look at how I came and thought I was a mistake. But he didn't send you back, her eldest would say every time, because she loved this part. He didn't send me back, Clara agreed. And I didn't run, though I could have. And that's the whole of it, darlings. That's the only thing that ever mattered. How a person arrives, what they do once they're here. She thought about worth beat. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, the thing that had driven her whole life. She'd spent her girlhood believing her worth was in being useful, convenient, responsible, in being the good daughter who did what she was told, in earning a place by being needed. She'd come to Montana still believing it, trying to earn her keep, still offering to work off a debt because she couldn't imagine being wanted for anything but her usefulness. And somewhere between the wagon and the wedding, she'd learned the truth that changed everything, that she'd had it backward her whole life. Her worth had never been in what she could do for people. It had been there all along, in the simple fact of who she was, her honesty, her nerve, her stubborn refusal to be smaller than she was. Ranch hadn't loved her because she saved it. Wyatt hadn't chosen her because she was useful. They'd loved her and chosen her because of the things she'd been underestimated for her entire life. Clean, unbeautiful, unshakable, strength of a person who tells the truth and stands her ground and does not break. She'd arrived believing she had to earn her place in someone's life. She'd learned she'd never had to earn it at all. Years on many years, and grown, the ranch prosperous, the story long since passed into the kind of legend that valleys keep. Clara stood on the porch one evening beside her husband. Both of them gray now, both of them slower, watching the light go long across the land they'd built together. Do you ever think about it? Wyatt asked her. The day you got down off that wagon, every day of my life, Clara said. They judged you so hard. He shook his head, the old wonder still in it after all the years. Looked at how you came, and I decided who you were. I've never been so wrong about anything. And I've spent every day since trying to deserve the thing I nearly threw away in that first hour. Clara leaned into him, this man she'd chosen, who'd chosen her back. You know what I remember most, she said. The danger, not Holloway, not Dunn, not the fever or the trial. I remember you standing in that kitchen the second night, telling me not to walk anywhere alone in the dark. Because you were worried I'd get hurt. Her voice was soft. Nobody in my whole life had ever worried whether I'd get hurt. My family sent me 2,000 miles and never asked if I'd survive the trip. And there you were, a man who thought I was a mistake, who owed me nothing, who had every reason to want me gone, telling me to be careful because he didn't want anything to happen to me. She looked up at him. That's the moment I stopped being able to leave. Right there. That was the beginning of everything. Wyatt was quiet, the way he got when a thing moved him too much for words. I was getting someone sent to me, he said finally. Well, roughly, the way he'd said it once before, years ago, under this same sky, a replacement, a bargain, a bride to fill a hole another woman left. He put his arm around her and drew her close. Now, God knows I didn't deserve the luck of it. I found the person my heart had been waiting for the whole time. You only one who ever came to this place and chose me freely. Only one who was never sent or sold or arranged, or choose and stayed and loved me on purpose. And Clara Whitmore, who had arrived in Montana territory as a substitute bride, owed name, a payment on a debt that turned out to be a lie, who had been decided about and sent away and underestimated by every man who ever mistook her kindness for weakness, a thief and bluffed a killer and brought down a powerful man with nothing but her nerve and a stack of honest paper, who had burned her own way home rather than betray the one person who'd ever worried whether she lived or died, stood beneath the wide Montana sky beside the man she had chosen, and knew all the way down to the bottom of her steady, honest heart, in truth, her whole hard life had been trying to teach her. A person's worth is never decided by beauty or by family or by the manner of their arriving or by anyone else's choice. It is decided by their own courage, their own kindness, unbreakable truth. And real love, the only kind that lasts, cannot be arranged or purchased or sent for like freight on a train. They be chosen freely by two people who see each other clearly and choose each other anyway and never once look back. Clara had been sent to Montana as the bride who was never wanted, had become the woman who was chosen above all others and who last chose herself. The children came back the summer Wyatt turned 70, all of them at once, from the lives they'd built across 3 states. And for the first time in years, the big house was full again, not again the way it had been when they were small. Clara watched them come up the road and thought of another arrival. Ago, a single wagon and a single trunk, and a woman who'd promised herself she wouldn't cry. She'd kept that promise for years, she remembered, long past the time when it stopped serving her. It had taken her half a lifetime to learn that the strength wasn't in never weeping, it was in knowing when the weeping was honest, and letting it come. She let it come now a little. Her grown children spill out of their wagons with children of their own. She wasn't ashamed of it. Mama's crying, her youngest said, "Let it, the way you're delighted when the strongest person you know turns out to be soft after all." Their mama earned every tear on this porch, Clara said. "I'll cry as many as I please." They sat up late that night, all of them, the way families do when they've been too long apart. Their eldest a woman grown now, with a steadiness in her that Clara recognized as her own. Handed down asked the question she'd been circling all evening. "Ma, Do you ever hear from her? Aunt Adeline? The room went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet around an old wound. Just set down her cup. She'd known this would come. Eventually, the children knew. The story knew there'd been a sister, knew Clara had come west in her place, but they'd never known what became of Adeline. Clara had never told them because for a long time she hadn't known herself, and then for a longer time she hadn't let herself find out. I did, she said once, years ago now, before you were born. Have you? Wyatt looked up. Even he hadn't heard all of this. Caroline wrote to me. Clara went on. After the trial, Holloway, after it came out that the debt was fraud, and Papa hadn't had to send anybody anywhere, she wrote to, I suppose, to apologize, though she never quite got the word out. The banker's son she chose over Wyatt, the one with prospects he'd left her by then. Turned out his prospects were mostly talk, and she wrote to me from a hard little life in a hard little town. Her voice thinned. She said she used to lie awake and wonder if she'd sent me to my death. She said she'd chosen the safe thing and the certain thing that had turned ash in her hands, and meanwhile, I'd gone west to what everyone thought was ruin and built all this. She gestured at the house, the family, the land. She said she'd spent years thinking she got the better end of it. And she'd been wrong about that, the way you can only be wrong about the biggest thing in your life. What did you write back? Her eldest asked. Quietly. Clara was silent a moment. That's the thing I've thought about most all these years, she said. Because I had it in my hand, the chance to make her feel every ounce of what she'd done. She'd chosen the banker's son and let Papa send me in her place. I've written back and told her exactly how those first weeks felt. The danger. Standing in a barn bluffing a man twice my size because I had no one. The ring, no standing. No sister who'd stood up and said no. To me, I'm the one who was promised. She turned her cup slowly in her hands. I'd have made her carry it. And Lord forgive me. Me wanted to. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Clara looked around at her children's faces, all of them watching her. And I want you to understand why. Because it's the most important thing I know. And it took me the longest of anything to learn it. I didn't spare her because I'm a saint. I'm not. I didn't even spare her because I'd forgiven her. I hadn't. Not really. Not then. She drew a breath. Because I finally understood that carrying it, the grudge, the wound, the ledger of who owed me, what was just another way of letting them decide my life. As long as I was keeping score against my father and my sister, they still had their hand on me. They were still moving me. And I'd sworn, standing in the dust the day I arrived, no one was ever going to move me. Again, she set the cup down. Forgiveness, I finally figured out, isn't a gift you give the person who hurt you. You close. It's a door you close. You can stop standing in the cold draft of it for the rest of your life. I wrote back, and I told Adeline I hoped she'd find her feet. I was well, and I meant both. And then I closed the door, and I never opened it again. And I have been warm ever since. Wyatt reached over in the lamplight and took her hand. I held it. And the two of them sat there, in gray and unbroken, at the head of the family they'd made. Did you ever regret it? Her son asked. Back, not mending it with them. And here Clara smiled. Because this was the question underneath all the others. And the young always ask because they haven't yet learned the answer for themselves. You're asking whether a person can walk away from where they came from and still be whole, she said. You can lose your first family and not spend your life with a hole in you. She looked at each of them in turn. There is yes, but not the way you think. You don't fill the hole by pretending it isn't there. Fill it by going back and forcing the people who made it to make it right, because most of the time they can't, and most of the time they won't. And you'll break yourself waiting. By building, by choosing new people and choosing them freely and letting them choose you back. Your father gave me, not a rescue. I didn't need rescuing. I'd have survived Montana with or without him. I was too stubborn not to. She squeezed Wyatt's hand. What he gave me was the first chance in my whole life to be wanted for nothing but myself. And I took the raw material of a family that threw me away. I built a better one. On purpose. By every one of you is a brick in it. The fire settled. Outside, the wind came down off the mountains the way it always had. They had had the first terrible night. She'd sat in the dark with a letter opener in her fist, listening to a doorknob turn. "I'll tell you the truest thing I know," Clara said, "and then I'll let you all go to bed, because I'm old, and it's late, and I've earned my sleep. Your grandfather sent me here as a payment. Holloway saw me as a piece on a board, and saw me as a soft city girl too foolish to count. Every man who ever looked at me decided what I was worth before I opened my mouth, and every last one of them was wrong." She looked at her daughters especially, girls who carried her steadiness, who would one day face men who'd underestimate them the same way. Daughters, the world will always try to tell you what you're worth. It'll use your beauty or your usefulness or your family for the manner you're arriving somewhere. It'll try to hand you a number and make you believe it's yours. Won't you ever take it? Not one of you. Your worth was never theirs to set. Or it was never mine to set for you either. It's the one thing in this whole hard world that belongs to you and you alone. And no father, their husband, a rich man with a lawyer, and no one gets to decide it but you. Nobody spoke for a moment. Her eldest rose, crossed the room, and knelt by her mother's chair the way she had as a child, her head in Clara's lap. "You decided yours," she said. "Well, didn't you? On that porch, in front of Holloway." "No, her love." Clara stroked her daughter's gray-threaded hair, for even her children were no longer young. "I decided it long before that. I decided it in the dust the day I arrived. I told your father the truth instead of the lie that would have been easier. Everything after was just me proving it. To Dunn, to Holloway, whole valley." Her voice was soft and certain and utterly at peace. "Well, mostly to myself. That's the only person you ever really have to prove it to in the end. The rest of the world comes around, or it doesn't. You have to know it all the way down, or nothing else holds." They went to bed. I won, the house going quiet around them, until it was only Clara and Wyatt left by the dying fire, as it had been at the beginning, as it would be at the end. "All right," Wyatt said, "for a bride who was sent to the wrong man." Clara laughed the real laugh, and the one that had taken years to come loose in her, and that had been buried under a lifetime of being the good daughter who did what she was told. "I wasn't sent to the wrong man," she said. "That's the thing I know now that I couldn't have known then. I was sent for the wrong reasons, by the wrong people, wearing the wrong name. Everything about how I got here was wrong." She reached over and laid her hand against his weathered face, a face she'd watched crack open by firelight so many years ago. "I got to the right place, and I got to the right man. Not because anyone arranged it. Because when I got here, I chose it and you chose me. And that choice freely made, two people who saw each other true, turned every wrong thing that brought me here into the one right thing that mattered." Wyatt covered her hand with his. "I was getting someone sent to me," he said. "The last time, both of them old, both of them home. Not someone who chose you," Clara answered, "and who'd choose you again. In every life there ever was or will be, on purpose, to the end. And Clara Whitmore sent as a substitute, mistaken for a pawn, underestimated by every man who ever crossed her, loved at last for the one thing no one could take or arrange or send for, closed her eyes beside the man she had chosen, the house they had built, on the land they had saved, knew with perfect certainty that she had spent her whole life becoming exactly, only and unshakably herself. She had come as the bride who was never chosen, the woman who chose and who, in the choosing, last belonged entirely to no one but herself. And that was the whole of it. That was everything. That was enough.